Most people think hearing loss is just an inconvenience. You turn the TV up a little louder. You ask people to repeat themselves a little more often. You blame it on background noise, or on people mumbling, or on the acoustics in a room. And you tell yourself that it's a normal part of getting older, that it's manageable, that it's not really affecting your life in any significant way. But what if hearing loss, even mild, gradual, easy to dismiss hearing loss, is doing something to your brain that has nothing to do with your ears? What if the research tells a story about untreated hearing loss that most people have never been told? A story that connects the volume on your television to your memory, your cognitive health, and your long-term independence in ways that would genuinely surprise most doctors' patients? And what if one of the most common responses to hearing loss, the one that millions of people choose every single day, is quietly making everything worse? Stay with me, because today we are going to cover hearing loss the way it actually deserves to be covered, not as a minor inconvenience, not as an inevitable footnote to aging, but as a significant health matter with real consequences, and with more options, more tools, and more reasons for optimism than most people realize. This information comes directly from the National Institute on Aging, one of the country's most trusted sources of health research for older adults. And about 2/3 of the way through, I'm going to share a finding that I think is genuinely going to change how you think about this topic. Let's start with the scale of what we're talking about. About 1 in 3 older adults has some degree of hearing loss. 1 in 3. That is not a rare condition. That is one of the most common health changes that comes with aging. And the likelihood of experiencing it increases as we get older. Yet despite how common it is, hearing loss remains one of the most undertreated health conditions in this age group. People wait, on average, years, sometimes a decade or more, between first noticing a hearing problem and actually doing something about it. And that delay, the research suggests, has consequences that go far beyond the inconvenience of asking someone to repeat themselves. Let's talk about what hearing loss actually is. Because it's not one thing. It comes in different forms, and understanding which type you may be dealing with changes what you do next. The most common form in older adults is called age-related hearing loss, or by its medical name, presbycusis. It comes on gradually, often so gradually that the person experiencing it is genuinely the last to notice. It typically affects both ears equally, which means there's no dramatic contrast, no one ear that works better than the other, to make the change obvious. It tends to affect the ability to hear higher-pitched sounds first, which means voices in a crowded room become harder to distinguish. Consonants begin to blur together. Speech starts to sound like it's coming through a filter. And because it happens slowly, over months and years, it's very easy to explain away. The room was noisy. The person was talking too fast. Everyone around here seems to mumble. The TV on that channel is just quieter for some reason. But here's where most people get it wrong. The problem isn't the room. The problem isn't the other people. And it isn't mumbling, or bad acoustics, or low audio production quality on television programs. The research is clear that many people with age-related hearing loss genuinely do not realize they've lost some of their ability to hear. Not because they're in denial, but because the change has been so incremental that their brain has been compensating, adjusting, filling in gaps without them fully noticing. That compensation takes effort, cognitive effort, and we will come back to that, because it matters enormously. There is a second form of hearing loss worth knowing about, because it is treated completely differently, and because missing it has serious consequences. It's called sudden sensorineural hearing loss, or sudden deafness. It is exactly what it sounds like, a rapid, unexplained loss of hearing that can happen all at once or over the course of a few days. The National Institute on Aging classifies this as a medical emergency. If you or someone you know experiences a sudden and unexplained loss of hearing, that is not a wait-and-see situation. That requires an immediate visit to a doctor. Time matters significantly in how well sudden hearing loss can be treated. The third form many people encounter is tinnitus, described as ringing in the ears, though it can also present as roaring, clicking, hissing, or buzzing. It can come and go. It can be in one ear or both. It can be quiet or loud enough to be genuinely disruptive. something important to understand about tinnitus. It is a symptom, not a disease in itself. It can be caused by something as simple as a buildup of earwax blocking the ear canal. It can also be associated with other health conditions, high blood pressure, allergies, certain medications. Tinnitus is sometimes the first signal that hearing loss is beginning, which means it should be taken seriously, not dismissed. Now let's talk about what actually causes hearing loss, because this is where people have more control than they often realize. Loud noise is one of the most common and most preventable causes. Lawnmowers, snowblowers, power tools, loud music through earbuds or headphones, all of these can damage the inner ear and produce hearing loss that is permanent. The research is direct. You can prevent most noise-related hearing loss by turning down the volume on your devices, moving away from sources of loud noise, or using ear protection. That is not a complicated intervention. It's a choice that can be made today that the research supports as genuinely protective. Earwax buildup is another cause that surprises many people. Wax blockage in the ear canal can muffle sound significantly, and it's one of the most treatable causes of hearing difficulty. A doctor can suggest simple treatments to soften and clear the wax. If you haven't had this checked in a while, it's worth asking about. Health conditions that many older adults are already managing, including diabetes and high blood pressure, can contribute to hearing loss. Certain medications can also damage the inner ear, sometimes permanently. These include some antibiotics, some medications used to treat cancer or serious infections, and even aspirin at certain dosages. If you've noticed a change in your hearing after starting a new medication, that connection is worth raising with your doctor. It is not something to wait on. And this is why doctors rarely explain this clearly enough. Hearing is connected to so many other systems in the body. It is not an isolated organ. What affects your cardiovascular health, your blood sugar, your medication regimen, all of it can affect what you hear. This next detail changes everything about how we think about hearing loss and aging. The research from the National Institute on Aging reports that older adults with hearing loss have a greater risk of developing dementia than older adults with normal hearing. Cognitive abilities, including memory and concentration, decline faster in older adults with untreated hearing loss than in those with normal hearing. Let me say that again in plain language. Untreated hearing loss is associated with accelerated cognitive decline, not just inconvenience, not just social frustration, a measurable, studied connection between what's happening in your ears and what's happening in your brain. The working theory researchers offer is this: when hearing is compromised, the brain works harder just to process sound. It devotes more cognitive resources to the act of listening, trying to fill in gaps, make sense of muffled or incomplete signals, piece together meaning from partial information. That sustained cognitive effort over time may come at a cost to other mental functions. Think about what it feels like to have a difficult conversation in a noisy restaurant when your hearing isn't quite right. The concentration required, the mental fatigue afterward, the way you come home feeling oddly exhausted even though you weren't doing anything physical. That's the brain working overtime. And if that's happening consistently, over years, the research suggests it may have consequences for long-term brain health. But here is the genuinely hopeful part of this finding. A recent analysis of multiple studies found that people who used hearing restorative devices, including hearing aids and cochlear implants, had a lower risk of long-term cognitive decline compared to people with uncorrected hearing loss. Treating hearing loss may not only improve how well you hear, the research suggests it may also be protective for the brain. That is not a small finding. That is one of the most significant reasons to take hearing loss seriously that I can offer you today. We are now about 65% of the way through today's conversation. And this is the part I've been building toward since the beginning, because I want to talk about what happens socially and emotionally when hearing loss goes unaddressed. Because this is the part that is hardest to quantify and easiest to overlook. And yet the research addresses it directly. Older adults who can't hear well may become depressed or withdrawn. They may pull back from conversations, from social gatherings, from the connections that give daily life texture and meaning. Not because they want to, but because following a conversation you can only partially hear is exhausting and frustrating. Because asking people to repeat themselves feels embarrassing. Because nodding along and smiling when you don't actually know what was said feels humiliating. And here's something the research highlights that carries a particular sting. People with hearing loss are sometimes mistakenly thought to be confused, unresponsive, or uncooperative. Not because anything is cognitively wrong with them, but simply because they didn't hear the question or the instruction clearly. Think about the implications of that. A person who is sharp and fully present, being perceived as confused or difficult, simply because they couldn't hear what was said. That misperception can change how families interact with an older parent. It can change how medical professionals assess a patient. It can change how the person sees themselves. And over time, the research tells us, these experiences lead to social isolation and loneliness. Two conditions that are themselves independently associated with serious health consequences in older adults. The chain here is not complicated. Hearing loss, untreated, leads to communication difficulty. Communication difficulty leads to withdrawal. Withdrawal leads to isolation. Isolation leads to depression, cognitive decline, and diminished quality of life. And hearing loss is also connected, perhaps surprisingly, to fall risk. Even small amounts of hearing loss are linked to an increased risk of falls. The connection is thought to involve the role hearing plays in spatial awareness and the brain's ability to process environmental cues. When hearing is compromised, that processing is affected. And falls, as you likely know, are one of the most consequential health risks for older adults in terms of independence and long-term outcomes. The evidence here is not ambiguous. Hearing loss that is ignored or untreated can get worse, and its effects extend far beyond the ears. So let's talk about what you can actually do. First, take the signs seriously. The National Institute on Aging identifies several specific signs that it's time to see a doctor. If you regularly have trouble understanding conversations on the telephone, if following a conversation when two or more people are talking at once has become genuinely difficult, if you frequently ask people to repeat themselves, if the television volume that you find comfortable causes complaints from others in the room, if you often feel that people are mumbling when they speak to you, if higher-pitched voices, children, women, are harder to understand than lower-pitched ones. Any one of these, consistently, is worth bringing to your doctor, not as a minor complaint, as a legitimate health concern. Second, if you're experiencing ringing, buzzing, or hissing in your ears, tinnitus, mention it at your next appointment. Don't wait for your doctor to ask. Tinnitus can be the first signal of hearing changes, and it deserves attention. Third, explore what treatment looks like for you specifically. Hearing loss is not one-size-fits-all, and neither is the response to it. Your family doctor may be able to evaluate and treat some hearing issues directly. For more complex situations, they may refer you to an otolaryngologist, that's an ear, nose, and throat specialist, or to an audiologist, a health professional who specializes specifically in identifying and measuring hearing loss. An audiologist can assess exactly what kind of hearing loss you have, how significant it is, and what interventions are most appropriate. Fourth, understand that hearing devices have changed significantly. There are now two main pathways for hearing aids. Prescription hearing aids, fitted and calibrated by an audiologist, remain the gold standard for significant or complicated hearing loss. These are customized to your specific hearing profile. But over-the-counter hearing aids have recently become available without a prescription, sold in stores and online, and research suggests they may meaningfully help people with mild to moderate hearing loss. These make access considerably easier and often more affordable. Before purchasing anything, it's worth checking whether your health insurance covers any portion of the cost, because coverage varies, and it's worth asking directly. For people with profound hearing loss who don't benefit from standard hearing aids, cochlear implants are a different technology entirely. While hearing aids amplify sound so damaged ears can detect it, cochlear implants create electrical signals that the brain learns to interpret as sound. This requires a surgical procedure and hearing therapy afterward. But for the right candidates, the research shows meaningful results. Fifth, don't underestimate the practical, low-tech strategies for managing hearing loss in daily life. Positioning yourself so that the speaker is facing you directly and so that you're between the speaker and the noise source rather than behind it. Choosing quieter locations for important conversations when possible. Letting the people in your life know about your hearing, specifically what helps and what doesn't. Asking people to face you, speak clearly, and use normal volume rather than shouting, which actually distorts sound and makes understanding harder, not easier. And for those of you who are not the one with hearing loss, but who love or care for someone who is, the research offers guidance for you too. Face the person when you speak. Maintain eye contact. Use facial expressions and gestures naturally. They provide context and visual cues that help fill in what the ears may miss. Speak at a normal, measured pace rather than rapidly. Don't hide your mouth. Repeat yourself when needed, and if something isn't understood, try rephrasing it rather than simply saying it louder. Stay patient. The frustration a person with hearing loss feels about their condition is already significant. Your patience and positive presence are not small contributions. Let me bring this all together now. Here is the core of what today's research tells us. Hearing loss is common. It affects roughly 1 in 3 older adults, and the likelihood increases with age. It is caused by a range of factors: noise, aging, health conditions, medications, genetics, some of which are within your control. It frequently goes unnoticed or unacknowledged for years, during which time it may be quietly affecting cognitive function, emotional well-being, social connection, and physical safety. And it is treatable, not always completely or perfectly, but meaningfully, practically, in ways that research suggests can protect the brain, restore connection, and preserve independence. The single most important thing the National Institute on Aging tells us is this: if you think you have a hearing problem, seek professional advice. Not someday, not when it gets worse, now. Because the earlier hearing loss is addressed, the better the outcomes across multiple dimensions of health. There is no shame in this. Hearing loss is one of the most common experiences of aging. It does not reflect carelessness or weakness, and doing something about it, asking for help, exploring options, getting an evaluation, is not an admission of decline. It is an act of self-respect and self-care. It is choosing to stay connected to your life, your relationships, and your independence for as long as possible. That choice is entirely yours to make, and the tools to make it are more accessible than ever before. In the next video, I want to take you into something that connects deeply to what we've covered today: the relationship between social connection, isolation, and long-term health in older adults. Because the research on what loneliness does to the aging body is some of the most striking in all of health science. And understanding it changes how you think about everything from hearing loss to daily habits, to the way you structure your time. Connection is not a luxury, it is a health necessity. And next time, we're going to explore exactly why. If you want to keep receiving honest, clear, research-grounded conversations about aging, the kind that give you real tools rather than vague reassurances, subscribe. That's what this channel is built on. One important topic at a time, with respect for your intelligence and your time. Thank you for watching today. Take your hearing seriously. Take your health seriously. And take good care of yourself and the people around you.